mission down to Brazil about a year and a half prior. So I drive down to Utah and I check into the hospital for what was going to be a 3-day treatment. There was these big horse pills that I don't know why you had to be in the hospital to do it, but and they checked me into a room, and it was kind of a shared room with a little curtain, and then the nurse came and got me and took me up to the 5th floor into this private suite. And I said, "Wow, thanks for the upgrade." And she said, "Yeah, people with your type of leukemia always get their own rooms." Yeah, and I was like, no, I'm the parasite guy. Check your records. And she did, and she asked me my name and my date of birth and everything. She said, "Yeah, you have leukemia. Oh, the bad kind. And I see that they're going to start chemotherapy tomorrow." And then I was like, no, really, you got the wrong guy. I don't have leukemia. And then I saw that she kind of realized what she had done. And she said, "Oh, you just got here today, did you?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "I'll be right back." And then I was just kind of sat down on the bed all by myself, like, And in came this train of 4 doctors. And they actually confirmed what I had. There were some tests that were happening while I was driving from Boise. And this was the days before cell phones. So that's how I found out. And it was a very aggressive form of leukemia, but because we caught it in being treated for something else, that was really a blessing, and it was only into 12% of my blood at that point. And so we started chemotherapy right away, and things went very well with my treatments. And for my type of chemotherapy, they didn't have any, that they have nowadays, fortunately, for many types, they have a targeted agent that can go after just the cancer cells, which is, to me, is such an amazing and a tremendous thing, right? But I didn't have that type. So it's a poison, basically, that they have to kill every cell in your whole body. So I would get a dead line, which I still have, on my toenails. So from each of the 3 rounds of chemotherapy that I got, because it would just kill every cell. And, and of course that's why you lose your hair and all that. And so I had to live in the hospital basically for that entire 4 months and 1 day that I was getting those. And so I had to pass the time, and I would do that by just kind of walking around this little portion of the hospital, which was the Huntsman Cancer Institute, and I would chat with the other patients, and I got to know several patients who were my same age, who had the same type of leukemia even. And there was one, his name was Greg Johnston. Oh, that's me. Yeah, I look great, don't I? And then this is a Hickman port. And this is what I was going in to tell Greg, because I found out he had gotten there just that day. So the first time that I met Greg, he was in his room and he was just about to go into surgery to get that put in him. And it's just a permanent line so that they can give you things and they can take blood and they don't have to poke you. And so I was showing it to Greg, and he was this cowboy from Vernal, Utah. And he said, "Derek, I don't got time for this. I like to get drunk and fight." and he was like, even in this moment of like total alarm, he was trying to be funny too. And he goes, "And they usually happen in that order." And so I mean, we became great friends, and it was a friendship that could have only been formed in this type of environment because we were very different, but yet we shared a bond, and we, of course, had that in common. But we grew together in a way just because we would sit around and share things with each other, and he would share with me many of the regrets of his life, and he would talk about a daughter that he had that he didn't know where she was, but how much he wanted to find her and tell her that he had cared about her and he had tried to keep her. And then he would just kind of talk about his life in general, and unfortunately for him, the treatments did not go well. That's him several months in, and he came in at 6'4", 240 pounds, and then he had a lot of complications. He couldn't even get the chemotherapy, and he had a stroke, and he had a brain aneurysm, and he would go down to the ICU. And those were always really lonely times for me, and so I started to actually go down to the ICU. I would find him, and I'm kind of lost. What's next? He would ask, we just had a lot of chats in which he would ask me to do something great and to live for us both. He started to kind of accept that he didn't think that he was going to make it. And I didn't like that talk. And so I would just say, no, Greg, you're going to live for yourself. And yet he would say, no, Derek, I just feel like this is what's going to happen, and you need to live for us both, and you need to do something great. And I grew up a stutterer, poor, and so it just had an effect on my mind at that time in my life of what I thought would be possible for my life. And especially the fact that I had a speech impediment. I had my career planned out. I was going to be a computer programmer because, one, that's the best career ever, and two, you don't have to talk to people. And so it was in those times where I really saw how strongly he felt about that. And then finally I went home. Oh yeah, this is us having chips and salsa. This is an important part of the story. He and I this was during football season, Monday Night Football, and the nurses would track how many calories we would be eating, and I'd be at like 400 or 500 calories per day. And then, for some reason, on Monday Night Football, we could eat Taco Bell and chips and salsa and consume like 3,000 calories. So it like saved our lives. Monday Night Football did. And it was, those were really special times for me. There's so many things that I thought were important in my life, right? I was newly married, I was going to college, and then all of a sudden when you're fighting for your life, right, there's so many things that really don't even matter anymore. And so anyway, I made it to the end of my treatments, and there's my wife Shelanie there. She would come and see me on the weekends. She had to hold down a job back in Boise so that we had some health insurance. And October 18th, 1999, I went home for good. That was a glorious day. Yes, it was. And I say this, that, our joys in our lives, I think, can only truly feel as high as the lows that we've felt. And so there was simple pleasures for that first month that just felt so glorious. Just the fact that I could walk out to the mailbox by myself and I could get the mail and I could feel the sun in my face and have a hamburger and taste every bit of it and not feel nauseous afterwards. And so anyway, I thoroughly enjoyed that first month, and for the first year I had to go back each month. And it was really nagging at me that the state of my friend Greg was in, because I knew that he was still there and he was as bad as ever. And so I got there for my first checkup, and this part of the story is actually kind of interesting too. I went in and I broke out in hives from head to toe. And I was kind of freaking out, and I asked my doctor, I was like, Dr. Glenn, what in the world happened to me? And she didn't even hesitate. She said, yeah, I've seen this before. That's your body just not wanting to be back here. Yeah, seriously, there was like no medical reason for it, just like rejection of the environment. No, thank you. And there's so many things about that place that at the time were awful that became like, in a way, like a wonderful memory for me. And I could close my eyes and I could smell the smells, I could hear the sounds, and that actually is, a part of the story later. But I found my friend Greg, and he was in the ICU, and he was at the very end. And I knew that because his parents were there, and there were not many times that his parents could come. And I thought he was asleep, but I went in there and I got him the smocks and everything, and I got down by his bed and I grabbed his hand and I said, Greg, I want you to make it up to the floor one more time. Because he always fought out of it, right? There's so many times that they thought he was gone. And he could hear me, and he opened his eyes and he squeezed my hand back and he said, Derek, it's okay. It's okay. But he said, you haven't promised me yet. You have to live for us both, and you have to do something great. In that environment, for that moment, I forgot about my fears of speech and stuff, and I said, yes, Greg, I can promise that, and I'll find your daughter for you. And I'm glad I did that, because that was the last time that I ever saw him. And I kind of went about my life. We moved to Salt Lake City, and I got a job as a computer programmer, and it was awesome. Just me and the headphones and the code for 8 hours. There was no cell phones in my life. I didn't have to talk to people. And this company had a basketball team, which was in part how I got the job. I actually found out later on. We would go during lunch and practice for like a couple hours every day. And during one of those days, I had an accident that really kind of brought me back to some of the memories and the things that I should have been doing. We were playing, and I always had to guard my boss. He was the best player. And he got me to jump up in the air, and then I came down on this like crown of his head, and I hit this part of my head, right on the top of his head. And I thought he had gotten the worst of it. Come to find out, the type of chemo that I had gotten makes your bones brittle. So you break bones easier. So instead of just getting like a goose egg, it crushed my whole sinus cavity and all of the orbital bones right here. And the sinus cavity is hollow, of course, right? So it didn't break the skin. Don't think blood. Think it looked like a big claw had taken a big chunk out of my face, because this was all hollow and the orbital bones fell down. So this right here just looked like a big chunk. And I didn't know what had happened to me. And they could see it, of course. And so they grabbed me and they pinned my arms to my side and they lowered me to the ground and they said, "Don't move, you broke your eye socket." And I said, "What?" And I got them off me because they were going to call an ambulance, and I wasn't having that. And I went to touch my face. And you know that sensation that you have if you expect a step to be there, it's not there or something? I went to touch my face, and I went back like 3 inches and touched something soft and gooey. So I did it 3 times. Yeah. And they were all standing around kind of like this. And I go, "What happened?" And they said, "We told you, you broke your eye socket." And we called an ambulance. And I said, "Dennis, you're going to take me to the hospital." And he was like, I guess. And we weren't even off the court yet. And the other 8 were like, "I guess it's just kind of game on, 4-on-4. And so yeah, they were back at it. And Dennis was willing to take me, but he didn't want to be associated with me. He was walking clear behind me, and all the women on the cardio machines told me all that I needed to know about the state of my face. Their reactions told me that I should be concerned for myself. And I got into Dennis's car and just pulled the mirror down, and I saw myself for the first time. And I was like, "Dennis, hurry up." He's like, "I told you, I didn't want to take you." And he drove me up to the University of Utah Hospital, the same place I had had all my treatments. Except I was going to the ICU. Or, I'm sorry, to the emergency room. And Dennis, this is all exactly how it happened. He pulls up to the curb and he kind of gets out and he puts his arm on his side of the door. He's like, "So you good then?" and I was like, "Yeah, I'm good." And just walked into the ER by myself. And there was one guy with his arm in a sling. It was a big empty room. And he, of course, followed me with his eyes. And I went up to the counter and the lady didn't even look up. She was like, "Please sign in, put your name here." And then she looked up and she, "Oh, heavens, just a second." And she ran in the back and I heard her say, doctor, come out here. There's a man, he looks like he got hit in the face with a hammer." And the doctor was not concerned. He was like, well, he came in right by himself, just get it. And she's like, please, come. And he looked around the wall, and the ER doctor, like his eyes kind of flinched for just a second. And he said, well, get him checked in. And so she did the whole thing, you know, asked for my insurance and everything, but she couldn't look at me. She was like taking my blood pressure and just not wanting to see my face. And they got me on the gurney and got me back there, and they hooked me up to morphine, because at this point it was hurting pretty bad. And they were giving me lots of attention, and then 2 skiing accidents. Oh, I forgot, Shelanie reminded me, one of the funny parts of the story is the guy with the sling, okay? Right after she gives me this reaction, and when she's in the back, I turn to him, and he's got his arm in a sling, and all he says is, you can go ahead of me. He was willing to wait for the smushed face guy. It was starting to swell. It was starting to swell, and then 2 skiing accidents. Trauma 1 came in from the mountain, and they didn't give me any attention. For 4 hours, I was waiting, and I kept pushing the nurse light. And finally she came in and she's like, Mr. Maxfield, we know you are hurting. These people are dying. And then she would go out, and I would look up and see myself, and it was turning huge and yellow. And I said, how do you know I'm not dying? Because I was like, I'm bleeding all over my brain, and I'm gonna die right here. And finally, after 4 hours, they came and they took me back for a scan of some kind. And then the doctor came in, and this is exactly what he said. Well, you broke your face. It's purely cosmetic. Yes, that was a foreshadow.
Right?
But there's way too much swelling. Come back on Wednesday. This was Friday. Yeah, they sent me home because it was too swollen. They could have done the surgery if there hadn't have been that 4-hour wait. So I went to church on Sunday. I went to work on Monday and Tuesday because I didn't want to use any PTO, and my boss would see me and send me home every day. Then I walked in on Wednesday, and the doctor, you know, he was excited about it, this guy, Dr. Orlandi, because, I mean, he got to do mostly, you know, more of like the type where, you know, people are wanting to change something about. And so he was excited about my case, and he said, can I have a student do the incision should I need to open you up? And I said, open me up? And he said, oh yeah, your damage looks pretty extensive. I'm gonna try to go in with some instruments, but if I can't do it, then I'm gonna have to cut you from ear to ear. And so I said, yeah, you can let the student do the incision. And he explained, and because at that point I was very curious, he said, yeah, it's just like a fillet knife, just like a fish, you know, just peel my face off. And that's what they did, as you can see with this scar from ear to ear. And I am full of titanium right here. This is all actually made out of titanium. It was perfect. He was so proud of his work. And 3 days afterwards, I was on the ground with our daughter Landy, and I was tickling her, and her head came up and cracked it. And I went to the mirror and I was like, Shelane, oh look. So do you see this dent? Can you see it? Say yes. No. There's a dent, and he was really disappointed. I went back and he's like, oh, I gotta open you up again. And I was like, no, that's fine. That's fine. But anyway, I get ahead of myself. The real punchline of this story, and what really changed my life forever and caused me to stop using the same excuses, was when I came out of this surgery. As I had said, I was up in the Huntsman Cancer Institute. It was a special part of the hospital on the 5th floor. It was a very small amount of rooms. And in my entire time there, I never saw them put anybody that was post-op into those rooms. Those were our rooms, you know, and they were rooms that kind of had like a different design to them. So it to me was just a miracle what happened, and that is, for me to recover from this surgery, they put me into room 522, which was Greg's room, and the room where I had spent so much time with him. And I was coming out of the anesthesia, and I'm sure that you've all felt this feeling if you've had a surgery where you're starting to become conscious of your surroundings. You can hear things, but of course, I couldn't remember what had happened. But instantly, I was aware, right, for all those same things that I had said before. Just, I knew the environment, I knew the sounds, I knew the jingle of the food cart, I knew the smell of the sheep. And I knew exactly where I was, but I was so confused as to how was this happening? And it was more a thought of that I had never left than that I was back. And then I remembered that we had a daughter, and I knew I didn't have a daughter when I was going through treatments, and so that was what kind of separated the time for me. And then it was the time when I received the most important message, perhaps of my life, and it was exactly, Derek, you are right back here in the same place where you made those promises, where you said that you were going to do things differently, and you didn't. And you're fundamentally the same. And that really shook me to the core, because I had always seen the need to do something great as something that was far in the future, that I could put off or I could do in a way that I didn't need to worry about yet. But it brought it to the here and now, and it brought it to the present. And I remembered the feelings that I had had and the promise that I had made to my friend. And so that was a moment that changed my life. I didn't care as much if I stuttered anymore. I knew that I was going to, so I figured, and I started working on a software company. I got up at 4:45 in the morning for a year and a half, and I did that, and then I got to the point where I could leave my job, and I did that business, and that was a business that I had for 9 years, and sold that business in 2010, and I was semi-retired. I thought I was going to retire, and it was spring of 2011, and I was driving home, and I was talking to my wife, Shelanie. We were talking about somebody who had been sexually abused as a little girl, and now she was an adult and dealt with it in a way that she took upon herself shame and guilt. And it was frustrating to me. And I had learned about some other people that I knew that had felt the same way. And I didn't understand it, and it seemed like it wasn't fair. And so I said to Shelanie, I said, that's not fair. Somebody should do something about that. And it was the feeling in the car at that time for me was like I was back in the hospital room. And it was exactly, Derek, somebody should do something. And that was the moment that was kind of the seed for, it was the seed for the company Younique, because in my last couple of years of my software business, I had been trying to pitch my clients on doing a certain model, and saying, hey, you should take the home party model and do a virtual party. And in that moment, kind of everything just kind of came together in an instant. And it was exactly, you can try that, and it will be successful, so you can fund that cause. And the mission of Younique, as you know, is not just about the foundation, but what we've done with the company, I believe, is all kind of wrapped up into that moment for me. And that's why I'm so proud of what's happened. I'm proud of what we have accomplished, because at this point, it is so much bigger than just me. And all of you that have been attracted to this cause and to this mission. And we work hard as a company to try to be successful in all the ways that we have to, with our manufacturing, with our commissions, with our product development, all of that. But I think you know this, but for me it has always been about that. And I'm really proud of that, and I believe that it's the main reason why we have been so successful. And I've never done this before, but somebody actually recommended it to me on the Black Status group. But to close out the story, I'd like to invite my wife Shelanie up, because as you know, she's the president of the foundation. And I always tell people I sell makeup and she changes lives. Yeah. Yes. So please. And I shouldn't even say that, because I've never sold a single mascara. So I'm even going too far with that comment. But I'm going to turn it over to her for her to close, because I want you to hear the breadth of the impact, how many lives are being touched. I want you to hear what happens at the retreats and the home that we have been able to build because of this company to fund that so that that cost does not get passed on to the foundation. So many things. And it's these type of moments, these type of trips when I see thousands of people that I'm like, it's happening. It is happening, and I'm so grateful for all of you. So please, here is Shelanie.
He didn't warn me about this, but I've told it a lot. I got to tell you about Morgan, though. He talked about Greg's daughter. She had been adopted, and he didn't know where she was, and he asked Derek to promise that he'd find her and tell her that he loved her and that he tried to keep her. And we didn't know where to find her. We knew she had been adopted in a private adoption in Kimmer, Wyoming. That's all we knew. And he wrote a letter to the judge hoping to get it to her, and we never heard anything back. And then years passed because we kind of talked ourselves into waiting until she was 18. So if we disrupted her life and were the ones that told her she was adopted, at least she was an adult. And her parents couldn't be as mad at us, I guess. And it was at Unified, I want to say 24, when they still had him in Heber, Utah. Because he would tell that story, and everybody would always ask if we had found her. And after that one, I said, we need to find her. Like, she's got to be 18 now, because we thought that she was a baby at the time and enough time had passed. And I'm like, I'm just going to try to find her. And I started with her father's name on Dex Knows, and I found a brother, and then I found him on Facebook. And I was friending everybody who, when I got onto Facebook, do you guys even want to hear this?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I just realized anyway. So when I got to his brother's page, there was a picture on the cover photo, and I was like, oh my gosh, I think I found him. This guy looks exactly like him. And I started reading the comments, and they were like, I miss that SOB, that MFer, da-da-da. I'm like, these are totally his people. And I was so excited, started friending everybody that was commenting on there. And of course, nobody was accepting my friend request because they're like, who in the world is this? And then I changed my profile picture a few days later, and one of those guys that I had friended that had commented liked my picture, and I'm like, yes! He accepted my request. So I sent him another message, said, did you see my last message? We're looking for Greg's daughter. And sorry, I forgot a huge important part. The very last comment on that thread, that's my dad with a red heart from a young woman. So I had found her, but she wouldn't accept my request either. She denied it 3 times. Because I kept sending it, but that friend got me in touch with Greg's brother, and then within 15 minutes I was talking to his daughter. And for the very last Unified, we picked her up, and she was in the back of the room when Derek shared that story about her dad's influence in our lives. And she met Derek and I that day, and there were a lot of tears. But we found her. We're still in touch with her. Okay, so with the Younique Foundation, we have 2 major aspects of what we do. We have the Haven Retreat. That's where we have adult female survivors of childhood sexual abuse come to a retreat that's free of charge to them for 4 days, where we teach them how to heal. And we teach them what trauma does to the brain and to the body, so they understand why they react to their triggers the way they do. And for a lot of them who have been in therapy for years and years, it's a light bulb for them because no one has ever told them why they react the way they do. And when you explain that to them, they suddenly realize that they're not crazy and they're not alone. There are 3 major aspects of the retreat. There's education, experience, and community. So the education is trauma in the brain, and then it's also, we teach them ways to reconnect with their body, because a lot of survivors of sexual abuse and trauma don't want to feel what they feel, so they just shut down their feelings. And if we can teach them things like Muay Thai and yoga, it's a healthy way for them to be connected with their body. And we teach a class on assertive communication, and a class on healthy sexuality, and a class on forgiveness. And all of these things that we're teaching them are things that they can continue to do at home. They have a workbook and a book that they can take and continue their healing. Say they really connected with yoga and they want us to help. They want us to help them find an instructor in their hometown. We will do that too. And we started recently a 12-week online course for their aftercare, so they can apply the things that they learned while they were at the retreat. We've had 2,100 women come through our retreat. And it's really hard to quantify or put a number on how many people we've helped, because it helps their children too. And it helps their companion, their life partner, their husband, their wife, whoever it is. Because when they learn about what's happening to themselves and they can explain that to their loved ones, it helps them understand the trauma too. The other major aspect of what we do at Defend Innocence, so one of our slogans is heal the one, protect the many. So heal the one comes at the retreats for the adult female survivors, and we do hope to have these retreats for men someday. 1 in 6 men are sexually abused before the age of 18. And we know that they are suffering too, and they need our help. We have a huge waiting list right now, so our focus will remain on women for now, but it's always been part of the plan to have them for men as well. Where was I?
Defend Innocence.
So Defend Innocence is heal the one, protect the many. Protect the many is the education on defendinnocence.org, where we educate parents and caregivers on how to protect their children and how to reduce the risk of childhood sexual abuse. It affects 20% of our population. That I'm not no doctor or statistician, but that in my mind is an epidemic. And people don't want to talk about it because it's really hard to talk about and it's really uncomfortable, and we like to think it doesn't happen. I'm pretty sure it's happening in your neighborhood. There's a very good chance it's happening in your neighborhood. But if we can get to the point that we talk about sexual abuse and preventing it with the same comfort that we talk about car seat safety, then we can really make a difference. We have one of the videos that say, it's 30,000 children die a year of car accidents, influenza, like all these stats. And then when it comes to childhood sexual abuse, it just climbs and climbs and climbs and climbs. 300,000 a year just in the United States. Just in the United States. Some countries it's more than 1 in 4. In some countries we have research that they will say that it's 1 in 2. That's terrible. And we can do something about it. We like to focus on the hope, not the horror. We can help those who have been through it. We can help them heal. We can teach them how. We can talk to other adults, other parents, our friends, and say the little things like, have you ever considered having your daughter wear shorts under her skirt so her panties aren't showing? Little things like that, making other people aware, and not just making them aware, but doing something with the information that we have. And we never want to victim blame. If a little girl gets molested, we would never want to blame it on her, but there are little things that we can do to add protection to her and to him. It's little boys too. So just thank you. Thank you for supporting this. Thank you for being part of this. I pinch myself all the time to think that all of this happened with a good idea and a desire to help people. So thank you for helping us help them.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. I'm happy to stay after and chat.